Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I got some hate mail yesterday. Everybody's optimistic. Sure. I'm not going bearish until Dan Ives is bearish.
Exactly. Well,
it's not going to happen. We have a special treat for you folks. I want to frame this out as well as I can. You've got a really odd headline this morning of breaking news. I'm going to go right to the Bloomberg, where we've got Trump Media to combine with a company you don't know, TAE, to build nuclear fusion business. My family goes back in this derby over 40 years to the Lawrence Livermore lab and Paul, the endless quest to squeeze two atoms and two nucleus together. Dan Ives is quite good on this. We're going to talk to him with Wedbush about this combination before we talk to him about the state of Mag 7 and technology as well. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on short notice. I go back decades on this. Fusion has been a hope and a dream forever. How is Donald Trump going to finally get us over this fragile line of successful physics?
Yeah, I mean, look, I focus more, like with TAE, I remember their backers, because I know them from a fusion perspective, Google, Chevron.
Google and Chevron have been their two major recent players.
Yeah, I mean, Goldman, some others. Look, I think when it comes to nuclear fusion, that's 25 plus years, in terms of the Maxwell winners, the Nobel winners that they've had here. So I've always viewed this is going to be, if there's a winner in the U.S. and global nuclear fusion, it's TAE. So I think that's at the centerpiece of this whole deal. It's much more about TAE, in my view, than in terms on the Trump angle. That's obviously the political backing.
Is this an arms race, if you will, a fusion race with China? We saw what they did with electric vehicles. You're conversant in China and AI, the NVIDIA chip debate in that. Is this like getting out in front of China, catching up on nuclear fusion?
That's what it's all about. I mean, I think, me and you have talked about this and, on the show. This is an arms race versus China. I mean, everything that they're focused on is going to 2030, how they fuel AI arms race. Technology, U.S. is way ahead of China because of NVIDIA, because of Microsoft, because of Palantir and others. Energies are scarcity. Like I've always said, energy is going to be the big scarcity. Nuclear has to be the play. Obviously there's ACO and others, but this will clearly be the first fusion public play.
So, Dan, I think most people understand the Trump Media Company as a media play, a digital media play, if you will. Can you tell us about TAE? Because most of us don't know a whole lot about TAE.
Yeah. And again, TAE, I think, is the centerpiece of the whole deal. I mean, even though it's a merger, it's really about TAE, in my view. I think, look, when you look, this is 25, 28 years, mostly out of California. They've built, I think it's about 5, what I'll say successful fusion build-outs. This is one, I think it's 5 Nobels, so many Maxwells, in terms of from scientists that have been through there, Schwab backing, it's kind of who's who in terms of what they've had backing. But this has really been one coming out of the Cal system, science community. And that's always what it was known as. It was always sort of a gem in the science community.
Yeah, I noticed Jeff Immelt was a former board member, but with TAE folks, to see Eugene Monet's there, who's just absolutely definitive across all political lines of America. Dr. Monet's, of course, associated with MIT. Let's say, Dan, as a statement, TAE has a heavyweight board, but you got to get something done. Going back to Lawrence Livermore Lab ages ago, it's a lot of theory. It's a lot of politics, including the ADVANCE Act, accelerating deployment of versatile advanced nuclear for clean energy. It sounds like an episode, Dan Ives, of Get Smart, except you're too young to remember Get Smart. But the answer is there any indication fusion will work?
Oh, I think that's you don't do this deal if you don't think this is going to work. I mean, if you look what TAE's done, it's not just, I think, the best bet from a U.S. perspective and even global relative to energy. And clearly, there have been obviously so many starts and stops when it comes to fusion, but I do believe this is one where when you look at breakthroughs combined with what you'd get from a capital perspective, because we've always said like that's part of the arms race. That's why this would be such a unique combo.
Paul, this is great. I want to thank the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy at the University of Pennsylvania for getting me up to speed on this. They got a chart in here from Sorbonne, 1915, a proposed power plant. It looks like the set silo.
Right.
I mean, that's if I did landman in hydrocarbons, the fusion thing looks like the set of silo is what I put it.
Dan, from TAE's perspective, why are they merging with President Trump's media company?
Well, I think probably two reasons, right? I mean, one, capital. I mean, I think Trump, you look at like $2.5 billion cash and, Bitcoins or capital you get right away if you did this, right? As opposed to if it just merged into just a regular spat, they'd have no capital. So that's one. And obviously it's political backing, right? I mean, implied relative to Trump administration, it's essentially kind of them picking the winner, more or less. And I think that's how it'd be viewed.
Dan, let us migrate over to technology right now. Of course, it's a day-to-day thing. My book of the summer, I think a year ago, 2 years ago, was Chip War. It was just a fabulous book. And Chip War showed how discrete and apart Micron of Idaho is. They're really, really good at making simple technology, simple semiconductors and such. Dan Ives, what did you glean from the Micron optimism we saw yesterday?
Look, I mean, you talk about like the right news at the right time, relative to nervousness, Oracle data center, and obviously a lot of the worries about the build out. Hey, look, that is just further validation, demand and supply, 10-1, right? 12-1. It just shows what's happening in terms of these AI build outs. And of course, NVIDIA and AMD and others, but Micron is obviously front and center relative to, what I kind of view as the core sort of, barometer relative to these AI build-outs. And I think that's investors are going to view this. And I think this calms some nerves, especially given where we are with the lack of news relative to companies coming out.
To me, Paul Sweeney, that's the huge thing here. You've experienced this too, the lack of news. Paul, Micron, the last 10 years, it's just appalling. 33.2% per year.
Yep.
That's with the recent
amazing.
moonshot up.
Hey, Dan, just with this deal with TAE today, just highlight for us again kind of to what extent will power and access to power and the grid be maybe a headwind for this AI rollout and development?
Look, I mean, today 3% of companies have gone down the AI path. When you get to 20%, you don't essentially have enough power. So obviously right now in terms of like grid, solar, that's going to be sort of important in terms of stopgaps. But to me, the only way you get there is nuclear. And like I've said, like nuclear has to be the answer and you have a clean energy, right? When it comes to fusion, like this is going to be the bet. You got to make big bets quick. And obviously TAE, in my own view, like in the US, that continues to be probably the best bet we have.
I have real trouble with this, Dan, because I've seen decades and decades and decades of, we're going to do it, cross our fingers, hope to die. We're going to do nuclear fusion. In your research, I mean, people don't realize this, but away from the camera, Ives actually works.
Sure, yeah.
Do you see imminent research where someone at Google in physics can say this stuff is going to work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Google, Chevron, Goldman, and I think many other tech players that, that have looked at this company, they're not doing it if nothing's happened. I mean, I truly believe they've had breakthroughs, which is what's unique after obviously decades and decades, like you've said, coming out of labs of the theory, but not actually being able to scale.
Dan Ives with us with Wedbush. We continue here this morning. We welcome all of you across the nation and around the world. Good evening on the Pacific Rim, a place where Mr. Ives visits often. Good evening over to India as well. Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Dan, what's the, as you think about 2026, and you travel a lot meeting with institutional investors, meeting with companies within the tech space, what's kind of the number one talking point for 2026?
I think it's monetization of AI, right? In other words, it's the build out, what the use cases look like, not just on the enterprise and on the consumer side. And it will get to a race, right? Like from Meta to Microsoft to, whoever from a CapEx perspective, that continues to be the focus, the monetization. Right. And I think that's really going to define the winners.
Okay. Quickly here, Dan Ives, I got January 29th of next year, 26. Okay. 2026.
Oh, yeah.
Microsoft earnings. I agree with you, Dan. Part of the angst here is an information vacuum. What's the information you're going to see at 4:15 in the afternoon, January 29th from MSFT?
I think it's the monetization from Azure and what you see from AI. I think the reality is that 30% of the Microsoft deals are tracking have been accelerated when it comes to AI over the last few months. So as that plays out and the forecast plays out and they reiterate their CapEx, I think it's further validation that, like, when it comes to the enterprise, Microsoft's going to be the core winner when it comes to AI.
I think that to get the nuclear fusion thing over the line, they got to merge Dan Ives' bright pink and bright green jackets together.
Sure.
That'll provide
get you there.
the entropy to get us to a successful fusion. Dan Ives, short notice.
There we go.
Tito's and Tang didn't work today.
No.
After the English breakfast, it didn't work. Yeah. Dan Ives, Wedbush on short notice, a trooper there to inform us on this fusion transaction.